Now, with both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump intensifying their presidential campaigns, the implications for foreign policy are many. For one continent, however, America's policies are unlikely to change regardless of who wins the upcoming election. Harris also seems to have more appeal among voters of color and younger voters than Joe Biden did before he got out of the presidential race. Now, let's unpack what each candidate brings to the table. We're joined by international relations expert, Professor John Stremlau. Professor Stremlau, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I guess we saw all that excitement taking place when Biden stepped out and Kamala was nominated as well. But what does this all mean for Africa if we had to put it on the pros and cons of should Trump return to that presidential seat, or should it be won by Kamala Harris? What will it look like, those implications for Africa?
Well, Masa, I'm not objective about this, even though I'm an academic. I can envision the Trump presidency, Trump 2, in light of the couple of articles I wrote and published on Trump 1, when he was not prepared, but he denigrated Africa. He showed no historic interest in it, and he's, in fact, rose to power by the birther issue, which was a racist issue against Barack Obama. So I consider the Trump presidency for a second time to be disastrous for Africa-U.S. relations, and I base that on the basis of a report that is 900 pages long that the Heritage Foundation has prepared on preparing for the seizure of power again by Donald Trump. And Max Primarek, who is a fellow of the Heritage Foundation, did the report on Africa, and in particular for South Africa. And he said the time to cut U.S. foreign assistance and aid to South Africa. And he gave a 15-page report on that, which I've read. And it would be a disaster for U.S.-South African cooperation. It would take us back to the old apartheid era when the U.S. supported the apartheid regime here, and not the democratic regime of Cyril Ramaphosa now and the GNU. But for Kamala Harris, she is of African descent and on their father's side, and Indian descent from her mother's side. She represents the new America. 4% of Americans said in the 1950s that they would approve mixed marriages, mixed racial marriages in the U.S. And according to Gallup polling, this is now 94%, and Gallup has rarely seen a huge turnaround like this. And America is becoming a majority-minority country, and it will become so in the 2040s. And a consultant told Trump that reportedly, and he said in response, "This will never happen. There'll be a revolution, and with this America is not going to become a South Africa." And that's sums up his view. Kamala Harris is a very, very different person, and her vice president, Tim Walz, is also a very different character. And I think they will play to democracy and to diplomacy as a means, not military intervention. And we can talk about that if you'd like, but I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but I think this really is a choice for Africa, and that they can't influence the outcome of the election, obviously, but they can certainly let it be known to their kith and kin in America. There are now nearly 60 million Black Americans that the Trump 2 would be a disaster.
Mm. And actually, no apologies at all for that, what you call a long-winded response. It actually, you put it into perspective pretty nicely there. And we've also seen from the Republican Party, since Kamala Harris has been now the nominated candidate for their president, that the whole thing about her race, you mentioned, you know, her African descent, her also her Indian lineage as well, her mother being Indian too, that clearly is some sort of an attractive appeal. It makes her a bit more appealing for continents like Africa and India as well. Do you think that's why the Republican Party is punting so hard in questioning her race or questioning her abilities as well based off her race?
Yes, because their core base of the Make America Great Again crowd, you don't ever ask when are they referring to? Slavery, Jim Crow in the South? What are they thinking about in making America great again? They certainly see the base of their support, those white Americans, particularly male. And don't forget that she's also would be the first president of the United States who is a female. And at a time when the woman's right to choose is one of the hottest political issues, you can understand why the turnout for her is so enormous, and so relieved that that Joe Biden, who was a burden on the Democratic Party because he's not what he used to be, and that was evident in the debate, stepped aside. You know, he pulled a Mandela by stepping aside and saying he was too old to run for a second term, and the polling showed him that he was not admired at all anymore, because he just was too old. He was in his 80s, and would be 87 at the end of the second term. So he stepped aside, and Kamala Harris has really excited people. But if they don't win big, it's going to be a problem, because the Republican group that is behind Trump is ethnic nationalist, racial nationalist, and wants to, by any means, stage a majority fiction, state capture, if you will, and press on. And Africa is of no consequence to their America, but it is of great confidence, great importance to the diversity of America.
Mm. Now, looking at some of the past U.S. presidents and some of the deals they came up with between the U.S. and South Africa as well, just looking at Clinton and the AGOA deal, which is still ongoing in South Africa. There's talks of also extending that. Obama initiated the Power Africa program, which increased access to electricity. Do you see Harris continuing with this kind of thinking, with this kind of line, as you've mentioned as well, that the Trump administration has made their position pretty clear as to investing in Africa? And it also seems, Professor, if I might add here, that the Trump 1.0 administration, when it did invest in Africa, it was also almost as a counter to China's investment in Africa, and not necessarily for the benefit or good of Africa.
Well, he was not prepared for Trump 1, and the bureaucracy and the bipartisan support for cooperation with Africa on various reasons, from reparations for the past injustices that were done to Africans, both in the United States and in Africa. But there is a Cold War overlay, or there was, which led to the justification of the alliance between apartheid South Africa and the United States. So there's a long history here, and there were different views in the Congress, but the Congress did sort of rein him in. I mean, he really didn't spend much time on Africa at all, other than to express solidarity with Afroforum and for the killing of white farmers, and Cyril Ramaphosa told him to butt out, and that was about it. But now there is this report that Primark has prepared, and it's got 4 recommendations to suspend any kind of AGOA cooperation and to impound the funds, to freeze U.S. participation in development, multilateral development agencies and for Africa, and to prune global health. The PEPFAR, was not a Democratic initiative. It was a Republican initiative by George W. Bush, and a proud one. And today, South Africa is the biggest beneficiary under the PEPFAR for HIV/AIDS. And so it goes on and on. But don't forget that also Donald Trump did manage in his first term to get America disengaged from climate change. And says he doesn't believe in climate change. Well, that impacts Africa profoundly. And Kamala Harris is a strong supporter of climate change amelioration, and especially since the U.S. is the biggest polluter in the world, or one of the biggest polluters in the world with China. And so, it goes all across the board for the impact that this would have on Africa.
Thank you so much for that. And I guess, Professor Stremlau, it also goes without saying in their slogans as well, the one being "Make America Great Again," and the other being "We are not going back," to contrasting stances indeed.